Hi everyone and welcome to your weekly energy update. A general tarot guidance taking a look at how the energies of the week are likely to influence our lives, both individually and collectively. And because this is the week of the total lunar eclipse, well, that represents that extremely powerful karmic energies are going to be at play both in our lives and in the world as well. So I adapted this reading to take on a special format where the very first thing that I asked the universe was, how is this karmic discharge, karmic reset, or basically karmic completion going to influence the path of humanity, as in, if symbolically all of us are together in the same boat, well, where is that boat, the ship, taking us? And for this specific karmic question, I used a deck which only has major arcana. Now below, the three cards represent the usual energy update, as in the cards depicting what is likely to take place in the world, in our lives, how the energy can manifest. And I also clarified all of the three cards because what I was receiving or seeing, or name it however you want, was a little bit mind-blowing. So basically I just could not translate it without clarifier cards. And even with the clarifier cards right now in this present moment when I'm doing this recording, I find it very hard to believe this. And the last part of the reading is an oracle deck where I ask for divine guidance, for the divine intelligence to just tell us, advise us what to do with all of this. And because it's an eclipse, so that means basically the hand of fate and karma and the divine mechanism is strongly at work here. To be careful with, and what we shouldn't do or what we shouldn't focus on, well, that might not really be valid, because this is where it really doesn't depend on us. This is where the universe reflects a truth about all of us, both individually and collectively. So it is a time to witness that, reflect, contemplate, and ultimately integrate it into our life experience. But before I get into the reading, I just have to say that whatever I'm going to say or channel or pick up in this reading, well, take it with a pinch of salt. It's a much better idea to just doubt everything or just look at it as a perspective, and not just because what I'm seeing, but also maybe I'm being a little bit subjective. This eclipse also influences me personally and my life, and I'm not a very down-to-earth kind of person. And all of this is taking place on my 3rd and 9th house axis, especially in the 9th house, the moon. So I don't know if I'm truly ready for this kind of massive reality check, because I'm a very idealistic person. I kind of do believe with all my heart that the universe, the divine, is infinitely benevolent. And if this is what shatters for me, well, you can imagine that I won't be able to philosophize myself out of this. So I'm a little bit fearful, I must admit. Especially that, my core belief is the universe is infinitely benevolent, and when, let's say, physical reality kind of reflects in someone's own personal life that there is another side to that as well. So that kind of manifests as a trauma in the making, in the creation process. So this is why I'm a little bit uneasy, or I do today's reading with reluctance, so I'm really sorry for that. But anyway, let's get to the reading. So again, please take it with a pinch of salt. Try to look at everything that I'm about to say through the lens of your own unique soul perspective, and not really what I'm how I'm saying it or how I'm seeing it. So the first card which answered my direct question, as in, what does this represent for humanity? It's the Death card, and this is also a bit delicate for me personally, because, going back to 2019, especially the very end of 2019, every astrologer kind of knew that the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is upcoming, and of course I tried to figure out what it means for the world, and the Death card kept popping up all the time. And, I took it very lightly because it's, of course, even the astrological symbolism was profound change, transformation, the crumbling of old structures, centralized power, social stability, the norm, etc. So it was very in tune with the subject. Yet, when we lived it, it had also physical death. As in death in its literal sense in the big picture. But I really hope that this time it represents just transformation, and at the same time the Death card is something so very in tune and fitting for the symbolism of a total lunar eclipse, which means that the South Node is an active part of all of this, which means karmic release, the release of the old, the release of the energetic, spiritual, philosophical, even mental, symbolically speaking, excrements of what no longer is needed within us. Something that we already digested and processed, and it just has to return to the cycle in the form of energy. And when it does, it freezes, so that is a transformation. That is a healing, and this healing and transformation ultimately leads us to a rebirth, to beginning anew, and for this we have the solar eclipse on the 10th of July, and that always births something new in our lives. So the Death card is the reset of the cycle, where basically the cosmic, spiritual, divine energies are plugged out. The flow of these energies stop for a brief moment, allowing this purge to complete itself, and it's plugged back in afterwards, refilling everything with divine power, with energy, with that specific spiritual electricity, if we can call it that like that. But of course, this is just the philosophical representation of the Death card. This can also represent where the crumbling of the old structure, the destruction of the old normality, of the old way of doing things, traditions, for example, well, that's gonna be something that will become that very much obvious, regardless of who we are. Even those people who are absolutely not even the slightest spiritual, well, they have instincts as well, and the instinct just knows. So everyone kind of knows this. And death is also truth. It is also something that we just cannot ignore, we cannot block out anymore. So it might have a lot to do with a revelation, with a disclosure. So the truth about something, a situation, or something that happened in the past maybe, or something that was done or is being done under the veil of secrecy is gonna see daylight, and that can be quite shocking and transformative. Now this Death card can also represent the fall of a leader, the fall maybe not necessarily physically, but just that their role ends, or they are replaced, for example, of either a world leader or a very important public person which has global influence, or something happens to an international superstar, a very influential person. And whatever happens to this person, and this can also be a group, an organization, an international symbolic structure which guarantees or leads a certain area of life, as I said, internationally. So whatever symbolic event might happen, maybe a collapse or change or some flaws or secrets being revealed, well, whatever that is, we might have a tendency, we as in everyone, every citizen, every person, to take it a little bit more personally than it's meant to be, in the sense that, well, that either affected all of us or it is something that can happen in our lives as well. Now, another connotation of this death card, well, this represents more like spirituality and religion. Because, regardless if you look at it as free spirituality or organized religion, well, it is still our perceptions and philosophical understanding of something greater than us. And what does death card tell us? Well, many times in our history, even quite recently, our philosophies, our perceptions killed people, killed certain members of our own community, of our species, and perhaps that is a karmic lesson highlighted here, that must imperatively stop, because if a thought, if a mental process maybe, if just a philosophical understanding of something which is not that real is able to kill, it is able to terminate earthly existence, well, ultimately that is extremely dangerous, and it is not a valid reflection of the human spirit, of who it is that we are as a species. So maybe the alarm bells, as I said, karmically and spiritually will ring, that this is something that we must necessarily change in our ways, or however we want to as a species, I repeat, because this might lead us to our undoing, or this might basically block our species' karmic path forward, our evolution, etc. And the final expression of this energy, well, the death card can sometimes represent wreckage, accident, or a certain kind of calamity which is actually based on negligence or something that was already there. It is not really like divine intervention or not really like chaos. It is when we ignore and neglect something very dangerous, like for example, the storage of explosives, or, death card, the Scorpio, toxins, toxic substances. And because of our negligence, because we ignored it instead of trying to at least look at the situation or fix it. It's skeletons in the closet, but when the closet is so full, it just comes out. So even if it's like a calamity or an accident or a misfortunate event, it is not due to neither nature or like the divine will. It is something that we basically did. So something due to negligence or ignorance or basically bad management of priorities. Now let's move on to see how both the eclipse and any other energy is likely to be influencing our lives, both individually and collectively. And the very first card is not a classic tarot card, but this card kept on popping up and insisting to be here, so I had to include it. And it's simply a depiction of the Tree of Life. Most people know what it is. It is a symbolism of the interconnection of the spheres that are seen from a metaphysical perspective to be the building blocks of the universe. So the universe's harmony and stability. It is also the symbol of ascension or one's spiritual work, where they have to learn the meaning and basically the symbolism of each sphere in order to advance up to the more divine realms and then manifest that divine frequency here down on earth. So it has a lot of metaphysical symbolism and different perceptions and ways of looking at it attached to it. So I clarified what message it delivers for us personally, and I got a very shocking response, something which I don't usually take into consideration, something which is not specific for me and my spirituality. And not because I don't believe in it, or I don't research it, I don't read on the subject, or I don't get messages or channeling regarding this personally, but rather I see it as something, automatic. So why should I be immersed into it? Why should I be speaking about it? Why should I be preaching about it? When, just talking about it wouldn't really make any difference at all. So anyway, this is DNA activation. So this is the first time that something like this popped up for me in a reading which I'm going to make public. So I'm not sure why my reading, why me personally, because there are so very many experts out there who can tell you so much about this and the science behind, the spirituality, history behind everything. But anyway, this kind of represents that something inside of us which was dormant, something rather physical, not just energy, is being very strongly activated. And it has a very specific, let's say, command line to what it has to do for us. So we might be experiencing this quite physically and also emotionally in a very intense and unexplainable way. So the cards which clarify this are the Ten of Cups reversed and the Justice card. And this means authenticity, but from a rather, let's say, divine perspective, from a genetic perspective. Now the Ten of Cups reversed tells us that a lot of information, especially energetic information, even neural patterns, were created because of our education, the school, the upbringing at home. A lot of things we might have inherited from our families, even ancestrally. A lot of things we might have simply inherited from our culture, from the physical location where we lived or are living. And of course, after sufficient time passes and a person lives in that, let's say, energetic configuration, the frequency, the vibe, it becomes part of their bodies quite physically. So whatever this DNA activation is, it is simply purging the false information out of us, and it is returning us to a certain authenticity which we could only embody in the very first years of our lives after we were born. Now the problem with this is that everything that we picked up, basically, even the good things like manners, like the high principles and morality which was passed down to us, because that is not really in our divine imprint, only that which is extremely specific and unique to us is within our divine imprint. So because of this DNA activation, we might simply lose part of our identity, in the sense that we will no longer resonate at all with, a part of who we used to be, and perhaps in this moment we still are. I know the years 2019, 2020 and the beginning of 2021 were extremely powerful psychological purges, where we, regardless of who it is, we were guided to deal with the past, with traumas, forgiveness, heal our wounds, help our families, not just find forgiveness, but also to be able to totally detach And now that part makes a lot of sense because, it's psychological work, it is an emotional purging. But this is where all of that past work will somehow become physical, as in it will affect us almost literally in a physical sense. Like, for example, maybe our nervous system, our brain, our thought processes, how our brain kind of works with information. If that old identity, if everything that, used to influence our lives when we were younger, when we were learning how to survive, how to be part of society, how to navigate in the human community. Now, if that part kind of miraculously gets replaced or upgraded, well, that represents a very powerful change, quite physically in our lives. So this is the justice card, balance, but the truth of who we are. And this energy might be quite heavy for a lot of people, because certain things which used to work in the past will no longer work, and new things which might not even make that much sense will work like a charm, like a miracle. Some things are going to be extremely easy, very like flowing almost, but our minds will have to get used to not applying the example, the pattern, the schematics, or the formula which used to work in the past, because that is no longer part of the reality. So I imagine that for some people this is also very healing energy. This is also where certain unexplainable desires just surface up and they become who you are. Your sole purpose is gonna be embodied in a very instant, immediate way, and there will be nothing we can do about it in a conscious sense. Something is gonna be enlivened or revived within us. Something that we were only connected to at the first 3, maybe 4 years of our lives when after we were born. So it is not just returning to innocence, it is like an activation of our more, let's say, divine identity. And for a lot of people, this will also mean some kind of karmic justice, karmic rebalancing, where physical reality will have to reflect that separation from the old, from the false. And as I say, when I say false, don't take it as something negative, just take it as what you've learned is like just a modus operandi. It might not really be who you are. Like, for example, baker, well, every baker, regardless of who they are, will do pretty much the same process. It is just the know-how, it is just the methodology, so that is somehow breaking away. It is being almost erased, deleted, and that which you brought with you in this existence, that which was dormant, but it was always meant to replace this, but all of us had to come to age, etc. That is going to be extremely active, and it's going to be a dominant force in our lives. Now, how we're going to react to that, I have no idea, but I'm sure some people will take it in a wrong way, other people will be overjoyed, other people will be immersed into a state of being like they're in the twilight zone. And a lot of people will definitely have this sharpness of intellect, again the justice, to see through all the conspiracies, even the ones they believe in strongly. This is where resonance will be like almost an extra sensory organ, one that may not be as subjective as it was until now. It is almost like the antenna of an insect. What it picks up, well, that is real for the insect itself, and it's very relevant. Now, collectively, what this means, well, it is a revolt, in an intellectual or informational revolt, where perhaps many people will simply just disconnect from what is being shared or what is being presented as the truth. This is where they might starve mainstream media. This is just an example by ignorance, but that is a very efficient way to eliminate something which is no longer part of your life. So this is where ignorance will be like a very powerful antidote to whatever is bothering the collective. You know, ignorance usually is a very, very dangerous, very negative state, but sometimes it does have its advantages, as in, you know the saying, ignorance is bliss. And it actually is when there is no greater truth or lesson or utility in whatever you're basically drawn in to become aware of. If that is no longer part of you and who you are, of course you have to block it out, ignore it. Now the other card is the Ace of Wands, and this is basically the symbolism of breakthrough, of very strong willpower, but usually collectively speaking that might represent conflict, it might represent strife, it might represent extreme forcefulness, maybe sometimes assertion, and it's clarified by the Nine of Swords reversed and the Death card again. Now collectively this is almost self-explanatory. This Ace of Wands represents a stronger willpower, a stronger unity of the collective than ever before. You know, there may be a lot of differences, there may be a lot of, symbolically speaking, bitching between different groups, different ideals, different visions, yet maybe the Nine of Swords reversed that fear energy, which was an extremely dominant force ever since the very beginning of 2020. It was like the base tone of our everyday lives. It doesn't matter if we ourselves were not living in fear, yet everywhere we looked we saw a lot of fear, despair, helplessness, even desperation. And now, maybe due to the eclipse or due to just the karmic forces at play, that fear will turn into sheer ambition, willpower. It will no longer act as a blockage, but rather as an assertive force. Well, this translates into a kind of uprising, revolution. We might see civil wars or extremely violent protests in some parts of the world. We might even see the international conflict escalating, but perhaps in the more positive side, because the Nine of Swords is fear, so terrorism. This is where terrorism will be struck back in a really fatal way. This is where the balance might tip. Of course, the scenery is not gonna be pleasant, and of course, it's gonna be the same thing, but from a different perspective. Yet this is also karma. If terrorists and those who basically worked towards fear, conflict, violence, invested a lot of effort into this, well, a karmic time has to come when they harvest what they basically planted and protected, and the harvest for great violence is an even greater violence. Now, individually speaking, this is a really good energy because it means bravery, it means courage, determination, it means like an unexplainable self-confidence where you don't just behold and look straight in the eye to your fears, but you overcome them, you transform them, you alchemize them, you achieve either breakthrough or create something new or terminate something really bad which was like afflicting your life until this present moment. You get a sort of divine empowerment to do something almost impossible, either because you feared it or because you were disadvantaged in very many ways. It is almost like a build-up of strength from within, which can actually take you into a direction, places, or help you accomplish something which seemed almost impossible until that present moment. It might not have to be a manifestation straight away. It might just be straight away aligning to that courage, to that faith, to that strong willpower where you just know that now it's gonna be so different than any other time in your life because now you are doing it and there is nothing and no one to stop you anymore. It is like a very strong energy of determination, of maximum courage and also ambition, where you're truly fighting against your fears, against your blockages, and ultimately for your ultimate happiness, for your rebirth. Now, the last card is again the recurring theme of the Justice, clarified by the Five of Wands and the Star reversed. Now, the Justice and Five of Wands is fight, it is competition, but in legal matters, in diplomatic matters, in a way to achieve harmony, non-discrimination, equality, freedom as well in a legislative way. So on the world stage, this is without a doubt fighting for non-discrimination, fighting for or against a legislation, a law, a rule, something that might prevent people from living their hopes and dreams, the Star reversed. So this is where the fight for freedom, equality, and equity is gonna be very, very highlighted even on the world stage. So this means the big courts of justice, those which influence the international stage. And maybe every country, every culture, uniquely and distinctively will somehow mirror that. This may also be petitions, this may also be like the masses of people demanding more fairness or for a certain legislation to be changed or basically taken down. This is where people and the representatives of people are going to be fighting, the Five of Wands again, for even the legislation, if this makes sense, to reflect hope, to reflect a bright future. Not to be based on doom and gloom or fear or prevention, if this makes sense. They want their star moment. You know, in tarot, the star comes after the tower. The tower has already been present in our each and everyday lives, collectively, individually, in so many ways. Now all of us are gonna demand the star to rise up. It is people fighting for hope, fighting for their dreams, fighting for their futures. But internationally speaking, this might also represent a reconfiguration, maybe in not the most favorable sense or in not the most favorable direction of the international alliances, because, you know, Justice card, Libra, it has two sides, two scales. So that means two opposing forces who have to reach harmony. Maybe the international world is going to be split up into two groups which will oppose each other, especially legally or legislatively. I do not believe that this means war in its true sense. Now, quite personally, in our individual lives, this is also a really good combination, even though for some people it might be a little bit salt in the wounds, because the Justice card means decision, but decision regarding other people, as in maybe contractual partners, work partners, marriage, associates, friends, best friends. So, you know, you are on one of these scales and the other person, regardless of what nature the relationship takes in your life, is on the other scale, and the two have to reach balance. So that means truth and honesty, and perhaps some truth is not gonna delight you, but it's gonna finally give you the right sense of direction to make certain choices, certain options. You're just gonna contemplate this, you're just gonna evaluate this, of course Mercury retrograde, but you will be that much closer to making like a safe and sound decision, which will bring you to the star card, your hopes, dreams, and your future, but in a very realistic way, as in not based on something false, not based on ideals, not based on naivety. It will be based on the truth. And for other people, it may mean reconciliation, especially if you had problems in your marriage, in your relationship with other people. This might represent a meeting of the two perspectives and reconciling, shaking hands. While for others, it can mean the star reversed, almost miraculously, unexpectedly, meeting their true soul level allies, regardless of what nature that relationship will take. Even if it's romantic, still there is a practicality with you two will need each other for something very specific. Now the last cards are, as I said, divine advice or guidance. As in, how should we take in these energies? How should we use them or navigate through them? And the very first card is the journey in reverse position. Now the journey, especially in this oracle deck, well, it represents being very advanced on your journey, as in having a sense of direction, knowing and being able to anticipate what you need to do next, what detours, for example, you must take, what's on the other side of your destination. But in reverse position, well, this is very clear. It is like a reset. It is, as I said at the beginning of the reading, the divine energy is going to be plugged out, so drained out for a fraction of a second and then plugged back into, which ultimately means a new sense of direction. Something that was old, regardless if your journey was, a miraculous one. You felt so safe and sound, and at least spiritually speaking, you just kind of knew how guided you were. Now that ends, but in the best and most favorable sense possible. Something bigger, newer, the upgraded version of that is taking its place. So that means new navigational tools, new GPS, perhaps the end destination is more exotic than you imagined. So basically it is stopping in your tracks and upgrading your route, your path. And if this happens suddenly, unexpectedly, if this happens in a very unusual way, it's not bad. Don't take it as something catastrophic. Don't mistake it as feeling lost or abandoned or whatever. This is actually a big blessing because it's making your soul's efforts and the energy it has to invest into basically traveling, symbolically speaking, that much easier, that much lighter. It's almost like before you traveled by foot, slowly but surely, and the trail of breadcrumbs. This is where now you will have wings. You can just fly somewhere, but when you have wings, you're guided like the birds, so like the electromagnetic energies. You have a special extra sense of guidance. But maybe getting used to this spiritually, even physically, even energetically, mentally, neurologically, is gonna be the challenge of the new way that you basically travel through life, travel through your destiny. Now the other card it's absolutely amazing. It's heaven and earth. Well, basically an eclipse is the meeting of the celestial and of the earthly. So even if the energies are very intense and will play out a specific way collectively, well, individually it can be totally 180 degree, 360 degree different. And why? Well, we are part of the collective, we are part of our species, of the human collective, so we share a lot of karma and everything else. But at the same time, there is a thing as divine justice. You know, when we had our down moments, when, let's say, we were ridiculed for our beliefs, for our uniqueness, our distinctiveness, our morals and principles, while the collective wasn't there for us to support us, to make us feel better, to integrate us. So, you know, the collective has to get what they gave, and if they rejected you, there is no reason why you should share the collective's karma. You have to live your own karma, and chances are, heaven/earth, it means that heaven is down here on earth for a lot of people who have lived their lives in such a manner, as in living by example. That which you do for another person, you do for the universe, you do for the divine, and you get that back. So for a lot of people, this is good karma in a very earthly way. You know, when the DNA activation activates, let's say, certain earthly mechanisms like how you attract prosperity or financial independence or your allies or your circle of friends or whatever, if that is going to be based on what you brought with you in this world from a state when you were totally pure, well, you can imagine what a big blessing that is going to be for your earthly existence. Perhaps for many people, this heaven on earth is the kind of guidance where the universe says, well, look, we are all connected, we are all one, and we have to help each other, we have to basically use our highest potentials to the greater good. That is absolutely fine. But at the same time, maybe you personally also incarnated here to find heaven on earth, to find happiness, to find your peace, your comfort. As in, some people are also charged with the divine duty to basically behold that tree, that flower, animals, to listen to a song, to an artistic creation, to look at the clouds, and just through the prism of their souls, feed it back to the divine what a wonderful job it has done. How truly beautiful and amazing Mother Nature is. And that is basically the energy, the emotion, the vibration of appreciation, beauty, happiness, praising creation, praising life. And the universe needs that. That is something that feeds the divine heart, so to speak. So if no one does that job, then, you know, how is the universe going to be perceiving basically the feedback of its creation? So we're almost like sensory organs for the universe as well. And a lot of us need to do this side of the work as well, to behold beauty, to witness it, to experience it, to allow it to sink deeply inside of us. You know, life is about the hardships and the challenges and the doom and gloom as well, yes, but it is also about beauty. It is also about the sanctity and sacredness of life and creation. So a lot of us have to live that chapter of our lives now. And the last card is the youth in reverse position. Well, this is simply self-explanatory. We were young until this moment, in the sense that, would you actually judge a very young person, like an adolescent, a teenager, or a very young professional who just came freshly out of university, for a mistake, for an error of judgment, for, you know, giving into certain temptations? No, you wouldn't. But after they reach maturity, things change totally. And in a spiritual perspective, karma changes totally. So maybe all of us, both individually and collectively, are entering into a karmic period where karma is instant, in either sense. So this is where we truly have to embody our diligence, our most profound life lessons, our responsibility as a human being, but also as a spirit who is connected to the divine, Again, as I say, what you do to others, you do to the divine. What you give to others, you give to the divine. What you condition for others, you condition to the divine. So this is where the mirror universe is going to be a little bit more literal. And for those people who truly found wisdom and embodied their authenticity, this is going to be such an easy and basically logical, rational energy. For those who couldn't see outside of the ego, well, this is going to be a very wrathful period and cycle. And it's maybe as simple as this. Old souls and ancient souls who done a lot of work until this present moment might be blessed with the comfort and ease to basically be young again, just enjoy life, just look at the infinite beauty and chill out, while those souls who had to mature in this lifetime will have a lot of responsibility on their hands, because the universe might all of a sudden, in a flash of a moment, take the duty, the charge, the responsibility away from the ancient souls and will transfer it onto those souls who had to evolve, who had to learn the lessons, who had to mature. Because chances are young souls or younger, so older souls in the making had a much easier journey, had a much easier life, full of all the pleasures and joys of life to keep them going, and now perhaps the tables turn. Well, this is what I have to say for this week. As I said, this is a little bit way too sci-fi or way too maybe even good to be true, so take it with a pinch of salt. But I do thank you so much for listening. I thank you for even taking the time to at least take a look at my perspective and my interpretation of this energy. Thank you for all the likes, shares, and wonderful comments. If you'd like to support my work and help me keep on doing this, you can donate in the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, I wish everyone a magical and truly life-changing week. Until next time, bye for now.